Good afternoon to everybody who has joined in, and welcome to our panelists as well. Thank you for taking out time to attend our webinar on the topic Reasons to be Vegan. So, I welcome you all on behalf of FIAPO. My name is Tuti Parekh, and I manage the movement building campaign at FIAPO. And today we are going to be discussing about the misconceptions, the myths that we may have heard about veganism. A lot of things related to different topics such as environment and climate change, health, ethics, morals, the things that we have been following since years. So the two panelists that we have today, that is Pareen Sachdeva and Niyanth Vidi, are both going to help us, identify what are the truths behind all of these myths that we listen to. So let me just go ahead and introduce the two panelists that we have. We have with us Pareen Sachdeva, who is the founder of Lactose Free Goddess, a plant-based bakery, and she is a PhD scholar in development studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, or as we all know, TIS, Mumbai. She lives with her passion to protect animals and the environment, and she's also the India lead with the international non-profit organization Climate Healers. As a human, earth, and animal liberation, that is HEAL activist, she runs Pareen's Plant-Based Living, or PPBL, the short form that is become popular, and her online knowledge sharing initiative to guide and encourage youth to make conscious, compassionate choices helps a lot of people who follow her get more aware about this lifestyle. Thank you so much, Pareen, for being here with us today.
Thanks, Tuti. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. Our second panelist is Niyanth Vidi. Niyanth is a vegan animal rights activist and a full-time musician entertainer who is trained at KM Music Conservatory and Middlesex University. He is an animal rights and vegan activist, and in collaboration with FIAPO, he has been delivering a lot of talks on animal liberation, intersectionality across various universities in India. Niyanth, thank you so much for being with us here today. We welcome you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be
Thank
here.
you. So before we go ahead with the session, just a few things that we can all keep in mind. During the discussion, all the audience will be very free to use the chat option to share any ideas or to initiate any discussions in case. But if there are any questions, please note them down in the chat box. We will be getting to them in the last few minutes of the session after the discussion is done. So if you have any questions, you may please put them in the chat box. At the end, we will go through as many as we are able to go through. So I think that is all about the introduction, and let us just dive right into the discussion. So as we all know, there are a lot of things that we keep discussing, and though we do read on the internet, there are so many different perspectives pouring out. So my first question would be towards Niyanth. One of the common things that we hear is that it's my personal choice whether I want to go vegan or not. What do I want to consume? What do I want to wear? So what do you think about this? What is your stance on this statement when people say that it's your personal choice?
Yeah. When people say personal choice, I tend to ask, okay, so what do you mean by personal? Okay, if I have to define what a personal choice means, it usually means something that affects only me. Whereas me being a non-vegan does not affect only me, it also has victims involved in the process. So once there are victims involved in a process, it is no more a personal choice. It is a choice. It's not a personal choice. Now you got to think about, okay, so it's not a personal choice. It's a choice which I can choose to make, which is either a cruel choice or not a cruel choice. So when people say personal choice, I don't really understand, because I feel like we have come to such an extent where people are devaluing animals to such an extent they don't even consider them as victims. So we need to first help them make the connection that, hey, animals are victims, animals are sentient. Hence, since they are sentient and are victims, it is not a personal choice to not be vegan. It is a choice which is an unethical one, and I can show that to you using logic and philosophy and whatnot, but it is not a personal choice.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put it, because we don't realize that when other stakeholders are also involved in a process, whatever choices we make are also going to end up affecting them, which means it's no more personal because somebody else is also involved in the process. Thank you. So, there is something very similar when we talk about personal choices as well. That, people say that I have one life and, I want to experience everything. So, another similar question I would like Pareen to shed some light on is that, people say that I love cheese, I love consuming dairy products, I love milkshakes, and that is something that it's my life. I also want to do the same. It's once in a life. So, how would you answer this? Like, what are the things that you would like to share with people who say that?
Very simply, if somebody asks, I don't want to give up cheese, what I say is, you don't have to. You really don't have to. All you need to do is make a slight shift towards cheese that is plant-based. And I'm not necessarily saying that, go and buy the gourmet, expensive plant-based cheese that's available in the market. It's an up-and-coming industry. That's why it is still a little bit expensive. Uh, but it's gonna grow. The industry is gonna grow, and it's gonna become cheaper. And the easiest way to still continue to have cheese is to make it at home. Just blend some cashews and nutritional yeast with maybe some rock salt, or whatever other flavors you want to add, and you can have everything you've been used to and more on a plant-based diet. In fact, I eat a bigger variety of food now than I did when I was non-vegetarian. So it really opens up your world into exploring so many delicious plant foods that you probably wouldn't have thought about before. So, to anybody who feels that their choices are going to be constrained, I say no, they're going to expand.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's quite interesting, like I can also share some similar experiences. Before I went vegan, I was probably consuming like two or three kinds of milks, let's say. But after going vegan, based on the consistency I want, based on the flavor I want, based on the texture I want, I can choose between rice milk and peanut milk and soy milk and cashew milk, almond milk, so many. And this is like maybe half the list of all the milks that we have available. So it's definitely expanded the way we consume, or what we consume, I should say. So another similar question when we talk about, the diversity in food is something where people say that other animals also consume other animals. Like, for example, lions, they also eat meat. They also consume, all the other animals, and it's something that we call the food chain. So, Niyanth, would you like to answer this? Like, how would we respond to this argument?
Yeah. So usually when people say, "Hey, lions eat other animals," I tend to ask them, "Okay, so is your position that animals do X, hence you're also doing X?" Then they'll be like, some people are usually like, "Yes, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say." Some people aren't necessarily like that. They probably will retract. They will say, "Hey, no, I'm not really meaning that." But usually when people say that, I tend to say, well, if animals do X and hence you do X, well, you also should be okay with many other atrocities that happen in nature that maybe is not, like for example, they eat their own kind and they roam around, without many things. They roam around without clothes, they assault each other, etc. So just because things animals do X does not mean we should do X. We don't look at nature for our moral values. We don't borrow our morals from nature. I also talk about how humans are moral agents, as in we have the capacity to make moral decisions, whereas animals like lions and other wild animals and non-human animals are moral patients, as in they don't have the ability and the choice as of yet, or so we think, to make moral decisions. And it is unfair to apply our moral standard onto lions and other animals, and then compare and say that, hey, I'm going to remain a non-vegan because lions are non-vegan. I also tend to bring up one of I think what all vegan activists should have under the sleeve, like a list of logical fallacies, because logical fallacies are basically points that are used in logical debate, that if someone uses it, it is almost automatically invalid. Um, and I think we're all aware of the appeal to nature logical fallacy. That is when someone appeals to nature, as in, hey, this happens in nature, hence it is good, or hence it is bad. That that line of reasoning is automatically invalid because we don't look at nature for our moral values. So I also would appeal to all vegan activists and non-vegans to check up logical fallacies and see that, hey, because most arguments are easily debunkable by just using logical fallacies. And when it comes to the food chain, uh, I find this a very interesting argument because biologically, when people say food chain, they say, "Oh yeah, humans are on top of the food chain," which is biologically false. I share with them a study which talks about the trophic levels, which are it's more the scientific consensus, and talks about how humans on the food chain, our closest neighbors on the food chain are pigs and anchovies, which are fishes and pigs, which are not really by any means omnivores or like predators or something like that. So them being the closest neighbors on the food chain, we aren't of any we aren't like on top or below. We are on a trophic level of 2.1 to 2.2. And okay, let's assume that we are also on top of the food chain. Let's say, hey, you know what, yes, humans are on top of the food chain, but even if we are, does that justify us harming animals? Because now what you're saying is, well, we are the mightiest, hence we have the right to kill people who are below us on the hierarchy. By that logic, that can justify every single atrocity that has happened in the past. When an oppressor has always thought, hey, I am mightier, and hence I will choose to oppress those on the hierarchy below me, which, the Nazis were apparently mightier. That was their whole philosophy. We are Aryans, we are mightier. In the past 2000 years, we've got, males always oppressing females because they think, well, males are more superior. So just to say that humans are on the food chain, we are higher on than animals on the food chain, and hence I will eat animals is a justification to all these other atrocities that happen. It's called the might makes right fallacy. So these are like my two, like it's a broad example of what the appeal to nature and the might makes right fallacy that I usually bring about when people talk about lions and the food chain and whatnot.
That was very insightful. Thank you for sharing so many details. And I think even if we think about human beings, we are inherently very compassionate, we empathize. And that is why there are so many social justice movements which gain support from people. And, we don't fight to have wars, to have oppression, to have social injustices, but we fight to remove them from society. So yeah, that's a very good point. But however, like, one more point that people do come up with, and I think it comes more from their concern when they also mention the food chain. They're also worried about their nutrition, the way they can balance their diets and everything. So Pareen, would you like to answer that? Like, people say that, calcium comes from milk, protein comes from meat, I won't get enough B12, so what do I do about it?
Absolutely. So the calcium myth and the protein myth, these are two really big myths that our food systems sort of rest on at present. And it's unfortunate that these are mostly driven by industry and not really the needs of our own bodies. Uh, Funny thing also is that nobody is really concerned about nutrition when they're consuming junk food. But when you take an ethical stance and say that this is why I do not want to consume anything that comes from animals, no matter how long we have been consuming it, no matter how important or nutritious majority of us think it is, uh, it really hits home for most of us. And it becomes very difficult to reconcile our actions that have really been rooted in these protein and calcium myths. But of course, we can counter this with facts, we can counter this with reason. And the fact simply is that only 37% of our total protein and only 18% of our total calories are coming from meat and dairy based foods. Okay, so two-thirds of our protein is coming from plants. So the next time you think about asking a vegan where they get their protein from, you should know that majority of our protein, two-thirds of it, is in fact coming from plants and the basic food Dal, roti, sabzi, chawal, fruits, nuts, seeds, legumes. Most of our protein is coming from there. Okay. So again, with respect to calcium, a lot of foods in nature uh, contain nutrients, but that's not the sole reason to consume them, right? Let me share this lightheartedly. I probably saw it on a meme somewhere, but it's really funny to think about that even urine contains vitamin C, but that is not a reason to consume it, right? You would still reach out for orange juice or amla to increase your intake of vitamin C. Same is the case with calcium. Sesame seeds are rich in calcium, so are collard greens, a lot of green leafy vegetables, okra. And in fact, most plant foods, in fact, all plant foods contain most of the nutrients, whether it's the macronutrients or the micronutrients in some or the other quantity. They have it all. Uh, just the trick is to have a wholesome, whole food, plant based diet to meet all of our nutritional requirements. About B12, so vitamin B12 is something that is quite contested, and whether vegan or not, it is something of concern for everyone. It is because it is neither plant based nor animal based. B12 is produced by microorganisms in the soil. And earlier, when our food was not sanitized, when we had much more contact with the soil, it was easy for humans to get our B12 from, from nature. Even the animals whose foods, we were consuming, whose secretions or meat we were consuming, were able to get B12 from nature. Unfortunately, that's not the case with factory farms. Most of these poor animals do not even get to see the light of day or to touch land with their bare limbs. Even their feeds are supplemented with B12. So to get B12, just cut the middle animal metaphorically and take a supplement if you need to. That's it.
True, and it's quite simple, I believe. I mean, there are so many diseases that have also been known to be reversed on a whole food, plant-based diet. And even I find it surprising sometimes. Even in our childhood, we keep hearing eat more fruits, vegetables, eat more, healthy foods. But then the moment we say that we went vegan, and then everybody's concerned about what will you do? Why will you eat only plants and you'll eat grass and whatnot? So thank you for shedding the light. Another question that comes from how we have been consuming food over the years is about our ancestors consuming food in a particular way. That, our ancestors used to eat and they seem to be fine. They have been consuming animal products since years. So then why should I go vegan and why not follow what our ancestors used to do, since so many years? So maybe Niyanth, you can answer this question.
Yeah, when they say our ancestors have been eating a non-vegan diet for centuries and whatnot, and they're completely fine. I'm not going to disagree with that. Sure, you can be healthy on a non-vegan diet. Nobody said that you cannot. What I'm trying to say is you can be healthy on a vegan diet. So I usually will show sources that this is to prove, I have the many list of dietetic associations that have spoken about a vegan diet with position papers and meta-analyses and whatnot. Keeping the empirics aside, when people start to talk about tradition and, culture, and we've done this for a long time, as I mentioned previously, we have a logical fallacy. I'm sorry to keep bringing it up, but this is something that I always think about. Like I immediately go to logic and how can I logically debunk things? And logical fallacies are a great tool because they automatically debunk it. They just like objectively make them wrong. So when people talk about ancestors and tradition and culture, it is a logical fallacy called appeal to tradition or appeal to culture. And that is automatically invalid because we have got so many things wrong in the past. Our ancestors have got so many things wrong in the past. Our traditions have had so many wrong things in the past. So just because something has existed for a long time does not make it right or wrong. We need to think on our own, excluding all these external factors of tradition and culture when it comes to ethical decisions. Ethics are devoid of tradition and culture because in our tradition we've had things like female infanticide, we've had things like sati, we've had things like racism, we've had things like misogyny, all these things were part and parcel of not just our culture but human culture for generations and centuries. We this whole concept of moral values and social justice was not a part of any tradition or culture up until very few decades or almost a century ago. So if by that logic to say that, hey, our tradition and culture allows me to consume meat or allows me to stay a non-vegan, by that logic we can also extend that and show them, well, by your tradition, not by your but by our tradition and our culture, I can also justify being all of these things A, B and C, which are not accepted in society today. So you got to show them, first point out that it's a logical fallacy and explain why it's a logical fallacy, and that's what I normally do.
That's, I think, a very nice way to put it, because logic is something that can't be refuted. If it is logically not making sense, then there's no argument against it. Which brings me to the next argument that people say, and I find it to be quite funny. Pareen, if you can answer this, people usually say that plants feel pain. So, what do you think about the logical aspect of this argument?
Well, I have a love-hate relationship with this question or this logic, so to speak. In fact, it was the one thing that actually got me into reels when they first started. I just dismissed it, thinking, you know what, it's just useless. But it was this particular thing that I made one of my first reels on. And well, see, you need to look at it from two points of view. Firstly, uh, about plants feeling pain, about what the physiology of a body requires to be able to feel pain. There is a difference between responding to pain and just merely responding to stimulus. Okay? People often say that, talk about the touch me not plant, that when you touch and it shrivels up, right? That is merely a response to stimulus. In order to respond to pain, you need to have a central nervous system that is going to, tell your brain that, okay, something has happened, but not just that, this hurt. Okay. So what happens really is that animals have a central nervous system that makes them sentient, that makes them feel pain and even joy and love and happiness and care, right? Plants, unfortunately, do not have a central nervous system. They merely respond to stimuli. Think about it. When you're chopping cucumber versus when if at all you have to visit a slaughterhouse, would you be able to skin a chicken? Would you be able to chop their legs off if they were alive? Even if they weren't, would you be able to, unless it was presented to you in a very fancy way? You wouldn't, right? So that is the basic difference between plants and animals, in that plants really don't feel pain. Now, even if you were not to agree with that, even if you were to still believe that plants feel pain and you do not want to be a part of their suffering, even still, you would want to not consume animal foods because more plants are getting hurt or harmed or, in pain if you eat animal foods, because on average, all of the animals on the planet are consuming 16 times more plant foods than all of humans do. Okay? So you would at least be able to reduce that suffering by a magnitude of 16 if you were to stop consuming animal foods. So whether you believe plants feel pain or not, it is best to consume only plants, if at all you want to eat.
Very true. In fact, yesterday we had a webinar on the same aspect, the sustainability aspect of consuming animal-based foods, where there was an aspect about how much of grain is actually fed to humans versus animals. And though we have people who maybe dying of hunger, we are still feeding plants and plant-based foods to animals so that we can derive animal products. So, and the numbers are, of course, very huge, like you said. So that definitely makes a lot of impact. So, okay, that is about plants, but people also say that, okay, let's say plants don't feel pain, but we still care more about human issues, about human related issues, about social injustices related to human beings. And why should we care about animals when our own species is suffering? So, Niyanth, what are your thoughts about this argument?
This is usually this is where um, people think it's a stalemate. I just don't care about animals, and people are like, okay, if you don't care about animals, I can't help you. But I tend to think a little. I like to um, so when I discuss, or rather when I've seen so many activists that I look up, when they discuss, they do two things. First thing they do is they seek clarity of positions, and second is then they ask questions. Then they start debunking these questions. So I would first seek clarity. When you say that humans are more, are you saying humans are more valuable to you? Or are you saying that you value humans and animals and just that humans are more valuable? Or are you saying that you don't value animals at all and you value only humans? Um, if they say, well, I value humans more than animals, and I do value animals as well, I'm going to say, well, nobody's stopping you from not valuing humans. Nobody's stopping you from going and attending all the social justice marches or social justice movements, or nobody's stopping you from being a human rights activist. Veganism is not an action to do. Veganism is not an actively positive thing you got to do. It's what we call a non-action, as in there are things you got to stop doing. So as you're a human rights activist, you just got to stop doing some things and continue being a human rights activist. That is what veganism is. But let's say you say, hey, I value humans, I don't value animals. Then that's where I tend to ask, okay, so what is then, if you think that you value humans but you don't value animals, what is the morally relevant difference between a human animal and a non-human animal? And this question is usually a little complicated because I'm asking words like morally relevant difference, and that trait equalization. These terms are like, 'cause some people don't tend to understand. I make it simple for them. You're saying that humans are different and are superior in a certain way. If that is the case, let me jot down two simple formulas for you. Animals, let's say animals equal to X and humans equal to X plus Y, where Y are those characteristics that or physiological differences that humans have compared to animals. According to your moral framework, what is Y that humans have that makes it justifies us not harming humans but justifies harming animals? And then usually you get oh, intelligence, or species, or social contract and whatnot. And then I can easily debunk those because I can show them that no matter what Y they present, I can find a human who does not belong in that Y, or I can find someone they value who does not belong in that Y. And if Y doesn't exist in a said person that or said being that they value, then the formula becomes animals equal to X equals to humans equal to X. For example, let's say they say, oh well, intelligence. I say, well, I can find humans who are not so intelligent. In fact, who their whole life will have to grow, unfortunately, in a situation where they can't be as intelligent. So does that now logically, by your logic, you're saying, well, animals don't have intelligence and hence I can kill them. By that logic, can I kill these humans because they lack intelligence? They usually say no. Or if they say, well, I just value the human species, I don't care about any other species. This is one of my favorite arguments because I tend to go into, I borrow from science fiction. But then I say, well, by that logic, you should be okay with killing dogs and cats because they're not of our species. Some are usually to remain consistent. Some, yeah, I don't care about dogs and cats. Do whatever you want to dogs and cats. I will eat dogs if I got the opportunity. To be consistent, people will say that. Then I usually bring about, okay, what about I bring about hypotheticals. What about have you seen Guardians of the Galaxy, or do you know the superhero Superman? Superman looks human, talks human, walks human, but he's not of the human species. Or what about Star Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy? He's half human, half celestial. Or what about Gamora? They're not human species. Or what about these beings? Would you be okay with farming these beings and slaughtering them and eating them? And then usually when they say yes, it's making them look like an absolute, someone who, if so, let's say this conversation is happening in front of 10 people. And this person says, yes, I don't mind eating Superman. I don't mind eating Gamora, Star-Lord. this person is now made to look in a very different and usually bad light in front of the other 9 people. And the other 9 people are like, well, I don't resonate with that position. I don't want to, I agree more with the vegan here than the non-vegan. My values should be aligning more with veganism now than non-veganism. Just to rephrase, when people say, well, I value humans more than animals, I tend to ask them, do you value animals, just value humans more? Then you can be vegan, you can completely be vegan whilst, valuing humans more than non-human animals. You can't be an anti-speciesist that way, but you can be a vegan. Whereas if they say that they don't value animals at all, then I tend to run this argument, which is made by, actually, there's a YouTube philosopher called Ask Yourself. He's a vegan YouTube philosopher. He has coined this term called name the trait. The question usually goes, name the trait that exists in a human being, that if it did not exist, it would justify then treating the human like a non-human animal. And that's when I kind of formulated into animals equal to X and humans equal to X plus Y. So what is Y? This name the trait argument also is, I think, a very strong, I think according to me, it's the best argument that exists for veganism. Because what we're doing right here is we're showing them, if you value humans, there is no morally relevant difference between a human animal and a non-human animal. So by your own logic, by your own metric, by your own moral values, if you value humans, then automatically you value non-human animals. So for you to stay consistent morally, logically, emotionally, you got to be vegan. And I also think that name the trait is an argument which all vegans should also have under their sleeve at all times.
That is a very interesting connotation that you brought out there, especially due to superheroes, because our entire definition of superheroes comes from people who use their power to help the ones who are oppressed, to help the ones who actually need it. And then, regardless of whether, they may be alien or human, we always look at them from the way that they are doing something good rather than whether their species is human or not.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting, and I think people can relate to it as well.
Just to add,
So
we make superheroes look anthropocentric, as in we make them look like a human for a certain factor. Like, that is just resonating with what you said.
I think that is again because we want to compare with humans, and
Yeah.
we want people to think that only if it is human-like should it be considered, whereas there is no technical difference except the outlook, probably.
Yeah.
So I think the audience can also relate a lot to the superhero connotation. I personally found it very interesting. So again, there is one more thing that people usually say. Let's say all of the arguments, everything that you said is right and makes sense, but let's say I even decided to go vegan, but veganism is so expensive that I cannot even afford it, and it's something that will be very difficult for me because I already have a lot of expenses and I'm staying at a PG or a hostel, and it becomes difficult to manage. So, how would we respond to this? Maybe Pareen, you would like to answer because you are also involved in cooking and making so many dishes.
Yes. Well, uh, a very simple thing to think about. Most of the foods that we have in the market that are labeled as vegan are unfortunately, specialty items or gourmet items. Okay. Um, because at the moment, what's working in the market is labeling certain foods as gluten free, dairy free, this free, that free. And once you put that label on, it makes the product a specialty product, and then you start commanding a higher price for that. That's one aspect. The other aspect is there are truly, uh, entrepreneurs, vegans who are trying to make vegan alternatives, especially accessible to people. They're working really hard at it. But unlike the meat and dairy industries, they unfortunately do not have the kind of support or the subsidies that the meat and dairy industries have. So at the moment, vegan specialty products are either just that, just gourmet products, or they are products that are really striving to meet to match the cost of meat and dairy counterparts, and they're trying to get there. Okay, there are, in fact, thanks to Compassion Tour, all of last month and the month before, I was able to meet a lot of local entrepreneurs who are really trying to match the cost of dairy. So Oneness, based out of Surat, is one. Then there is another one that is, in fact, based out of Noida, that I cannot place the name of, but I'll look it up and I'll share with you. They're making soy milk, and they're trying to sell it on par with the dairy milk. And they had me try the strawberry. It was like going back into my childhood and drinking strawberry milk. It was just that good. And I really hope that it really comes into the market soon and we can all consume it. One way, though, to still be able to eat vegan on a budget is to eat foods that are vegan by default but are not essentially marketed as such. So, developing the skill of reading labels on packaged goods is a great place to begin. There are some things like, milk solids or gelatin, etc., that once you just put at the back of your mind that, okay, if there are these things in the food, then it's probably not vegan, and I don't want to essentially necessarily buy it. And so just try to develop a habit of reading labels if you want to buy packaged foods. And another great way to still eat vegan on a budget is to try to take some time out and make a little bit of effort into making some alternatives at home. It's very easy to make plant-based milk at home. And of course, everybody knows the soak and, soak overnight and then blend and strain method. And now there's another method that's absolutely easy, and I don't know why most people are not talking about it, but it is just to use nut butters. Okay. You can use peanut butter, cashew butter, or whatever, coconut butter, and just, take a spoonful and blend it with water, and that's it. You can get milk. It's that easy. If you're short on time and you don't want to do the soaking and straining, just get the nut butter. Even those you can make at home, and just blend with water, and make your coffee and tea, and if kheer or laddus, whatever you want to make, it's really easy. So those are the couple of things that I would still suggest if you want to eat, specialty or alternative things still on a budget. Try making them at home, or try and look for things that are vegan by accident. But always remember that veganism itself is not expensive. It's some specialty alternatives that are still new in the market. Those are the products that are expensive. Eating vegan itself is not. The most basic food that we eat, dal, roti, sabzi, sambar, vada, the basic food, it's vegan and it's not expensive.
Very true. And thank you for sharing the new recipe. Even I did not know that, you could make milk at home from nut butters. That's something that maybe I will also try out. And I think you made a very good point when you said that the most basic foods that people consume on a daily basis are all, of course, plant-based. Because the basic things, especially which grow in our country, which are local to our country, like rice, potatoes, lentils, and beans, these are also accessible, which is something accessibility may become an issue or a challenge for some people. So the most basic local foods are also very accessible, and hence they are also inexpensive. So that's a wonderful point, I mean. Another thing that sometimes also come up when people talk about consuming foods which are local, I have heard a lot of times that people do consume non-vegetarian food as well, because they say that it's easily available, it's convenient and all. And on the other hand, we have this entire division where there are vegetarians who say that at least I don't consume meat, I don't consume flesh of any animal. So, Niyanth, would you like to answer that? What are your thoughts about people who say that at least I'm vegetarian? That's
Mhm.
at least better than meat consuming people.
Yeah, I say, well, for starters, you can be a vegetarian, but the point is you're still a non-vegan. You are still a speciesist who believes that consuming animal products is morally okay. So I would point that out, and then we are also, I think, all of us then explain how the dairy and egg industries are one of the worst industries on the planet to exist. Even if you are a vegetarian, you are basically contributing to the beef industry on a daily basis. You are contributing to the culling of male chicks on a daily basis. So you being a vegetarian does not mean that meat does not exist because of you. In fact, most beef exists and most veal exists because you exist as a vegetarian, which most of us talk about. But then I also like to draw analogies and see how consistent they are with that approach. Well, I'm not eating meat. Basically, let's say you haven't reached the destination of vegan yet. You're saying that I want to stop halfway, and I think me being halfway here is enough for me. Would you accept that in any other social justice movement? Let's say there's a racist who is racist for 7 days a week, and this racist starts to say, you know what, I'm going to reduce me being racist. I'm going to start being racist only 3 days a week. Would you then accept that? Or would you accept someone being a misogynist for 3 days a week? Or would you accept someone being, let's say there's someone who abuses a female 7 days a week, and then they say, you know what, I'm going to stop abusing my wife 7 days a week. I'm going to abuse her only 3 days a week. You know what? At least I don't abuse her 7 days a week, like person B, who abuses their wife 7 days a week. It doesn't matter whether they abuse their wife 7 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 1 day a week. The aspect is you are abusing a human being. You are causing pain, right? So the second you cause pain and suffering, automatically, depending on your moral value, depending on your normative ethic and your moral values, that is automatically wrong. And I also show them that by their own logic, they will not stay logically consistent to other scenarios where it is more of a welfareist approach. When I wouldn't say vegetarianism is a welfareist approach at all. I would say it's more of a coping mechanism, because most people are just they just think that vegetarianism is for some reason a good thing when it is absolutely not. Um, so I usually show them that by their own logic, to say that I will go halfway through and I will not go that whole journey, they will not remain consistent with if I were to draw other analogies. And the second they say, oh, you can't compare human just injustices with non-human injustices, I go back to name the trait. I say, okay, so what's the difference between a human and an animal then? Then I show them by their own logic, there's no morally relevant difference between a human animal and a non-human animal. That humans equal to animals equal to X. If that is the case, then I can absolutely equate a human social justice movement with a non-human social justice movement. And when people say you cannot compare, that's very wrong. I can absolutely compare anything with anything. I can compare the amount of dust molecules that exist currently on the bed that I'm sitting on, or on the chair that I'm sitting on, or on the floor that I'm sitting on, versus, let's say, I don't know, how fast a person can blow a balloon. I can compare those two metrics. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to make sense. But can I equate it? That's the difference. And I'm showing that I can equate human issues with non-human issues. Yes, I can, absolutely.
That's a beautiful way to put it, because a lot of times people don't realize as well that even when you may be vegetarian, there are still ways more than your diet, which may also be, leading to exploitation of animals, killing of animals in more than one ways. Like one of the ways is by consuming dairy, which also leads to killing of male calves, the cows and buffaloes who may not be lactating anymore, and so many other things. They also face so many sufferings in forms of diseases that they get, or just the general living conditions as well. So I think yeah, it's a good way to look at it, that when you are looking at animals, what are the aspects that you are considering and what are the aspects that you're comparing.
Yeah, just to add, when people say, hey, I'm vegetarian, I feel like they're coming from a diet perspective. The second they say I'm vegetarian, they're also like, hey, I know dietarily I'm a vegetarian, but I'm going to start off with, for starters, with, yeah, it's not only about the diet here. It's not just about meat. It's about meat, dairy, eggs, honey, leather, silk, wool, clothing,
True.
cosmetics, your whole aspect. Okay, you're a vegetarian. Do you go to zoos? Do you go to circuses? What about horse riding? What about horse riding, dog racing? Do you support all of these industries? What about animal testing industries? So sure, I think I would also explain that, diet is one of the biggest aspects of veganism, because that's what most people have the most difficulty leaving. But I think, I would also explain how that there's so much more cruelty that occurs as being a vegetarian, as you mentioned.
Yeah, unfortunately, we live in a world which has completely enslaved animals, and it's still an anthropocentric world. So there are so many aspects in which animals are exploited, and the least one can do is just become aware about as many things as possible and stop contributing in as many ways as possible. So thank you for sharing these insights as well once again. Um,
Thank you.
these were the pointers that were with me to discuss for today, but there are some very interesting questions in the chat that I have been reading while our discussion was going on. So maybe we can just dive into the questions. I'll read out the question for you.
Kriti,
And yes,
um,
Pari.
if I may add a little
Sure,
bit
sure.
on lacto-vegetarianism. Um, See, firstly, understanding vegetarianism and what the term is in Hindi for it, which is Shak Ahar, uh, someone who derives their nutrition from plants. Shak meaning plants, Ahar meaning food. Okay, so the literal translation of Shak Ahar would, in a modern English word terms, be a vegan diet. It wouldn't be vegetarianism or lacto-vegetarianism as we know it now. Again, thinking about consuming vegetarian or consuming ethical dairy or trying to be an ethical lacto-vegetarian and thinking that you're doing good for the environment. Unfortunately, ethical lacto-vegetarianism is worse than non-vegetarianism for the planet. Because think about it, if you were to be consuming ethical dairy, you would want the male calves to not be killed. You would want the dairy cows to be able to live out the rest of their days instead of being slaughtered for their meat or their skin. If you wanted to do that, you would need 4 times as many cows, buffaloes, bulls than there already are on the planet. And already, India ranks number one in cow as well as buffalo population. In fact, we have more than half of the world's buffalo population in India alone. So to think that vegetarianism, especially ethical vegetarianism, could save the planet, far from it. In terms of its resource use, it is worse than even consuming meat because the dairy cows that are wasted, that are spent, are the ones that are feeding our massive beef exports, that are making India the largest beef exporter in the country. So that is something that I wanted to bring to notice for everyone, and thank you.
Thank you for pointing it out because it's very sad and unfortunate, when we hear such statistics, such huge numbers about our own country, whereas we are the ones who are known to be believing in ahimsa and compassion. So I believe it's very vital information that you shared for everybody to know. So there are some questions in the chat box that I was going to, which are related to what we are discussing. Somebody has asked over here that I think this question is already answered. Manan has asked the question: lack of vegan dairy options in India, even in 2022. Should elite vegans come up with affordable vegan options? So, Pareen, I think you had discussed about this pointer. If there's anything else that you or Niyanth would like to add on, please go ahead.
I just hope that the question got answered. And in order to make, again, vegan alternatives cheaper, we need to push for policy reform, right? Because there is no tax on dairy, but plant-based beverages are still taxed at 18%. GST on those is still 18%. So we need to lobby for better reforms, and that's how we can get specialty vegan goods to become cheaper.
True, very
Yeah.
true.
One point I would add is, well, for starters, you don't need vegan dairy to survive. You don't need vegan any alternative to survive. Like when I was living in Chennai, when I was living in a very, very strict budget, like 1,500 rupees a month, there was a small store right opposite to my house which used to sell idlis for 5 rupees an idli. And I used to be very hungry. I used to get 50 rupees, 10 idlis, and they would give tons of sambar, tons of chutney, eat that. And most of my foods, so currently I'm not in India, I'm in New York, and it is very costly to live here. I hardly have a job that pays me enough to be a to to survive. I'm literally living from paycheck to paycheck. So the way I've learned that the best way to be vegan is not by vegan dairy, not by vegan alternatives. I cook most of my meals, which is very, very cheap. I cook beans, legumes. I cook so much of sambar, curries, rice. I make idlis, I make chapatis, I make Indian foods by default are so cheap and are almost automatically vegan. I feel like it's such a blessing for most of us to have grown up with Indian cuisines, because when I see people who are not Indian try to switch to veganism, they don't know what to eat. But for us, it is not like a big difference. It's just like just remove dairy and eat what you're eating on a daily basis. Dal, sabji, roti, idli, rasam, sambar. Like it's the amount of options are endless. So I just don't consume vegan dairy. I don't consume vegan alternatives, and I'm okay with that. I do understand that some people still have that craving for it, and as Pareen rightly mentioned, you can always make it at home, and it is so much more cheaper to make it at home. It takes a couple of tries, but once you nail that taste, you there's no going back to industrialized plant-based products as well. You can just make it at home, and you can completely enjoy it.
True. Wonderful. Okay, we have one more question, which is asked by Karan Arya. Karan is saying, I watched video featuring Sadhguru regarding this. Still, I don't understand the debate. Like, why choose plant and not meat? Basically, I often feel plants also have life. Often, non-vegan also use this fact. Please clear this query. So again, I feel part of this was touched upon by Pareen. She gave a descriptive answer. But if either one of you would like to shed some light on the same.
Yeah, I mean, the point that because I often feel plants also have life. Well, yeah, I mean, I think all of us will agree with that. Plants are living beings. But what we talk about is sentience. We don't talk about whether the human or the animal or the plant is living or not. Bacteria is also living. What we talk about is the ability to have a unique experience, or the ability to feel pain and suffering is what we talk about. And plants have not shown us any characteristics that actually demonstrate that they can actually feel pain. As Pareen rightly mentioned, to feel pain, you need a central nervous system and a brain connected to the central nervous system. For example, if I were to cut my hair, it doesn't hurt, because there are no nerve endings that connect to my central nervous system and to my brain that are connected to my hair. That's why when I cut my hair, it doesn't feel pain. So think of the same thing, but plants. Plants don't have nerve endings which connect the whole body to each other. They don't have a brain which tells them, oh, when this is being cut, this is what you're feeling. No, they don't have that. So just to clarify, Karan, like plants don't feel pain. They are living things. They are living beings, yes, but they don't feel pain. And if they don't feel pain, there's no harm and suffering caused. And if there's no harm and suffering caused, it is usually a positive thing to do. Or rather, not that it's a positive thing to do, it is not a negative thing to do. Um, so Sadhguru, usually what I understand is Sadhguru, when he's a great orator, he talks great about many things, but when it comes to veganism, he's always kind of contradictory. And I would not look at Sadhguru as a means of a vegan message for you. I would rather look at other great speakers and talkers and orators who speak about veganism in a positive light, so that they can shed more information to you and align with your values as well. There's Acharya Prasanji, who's a great orator and talks about veganism as well. I don't think, for example, if I want to learn about physics, I will not go to an art student. If I want to learn about biology, I will not go to an economist. Right? I would go to the right people to learn about the right subjects. So if I want to learn about veganism, I will not go to Sadhguru, because I don't think they are an expert in that. I will rather go to someone like Acharya Prashanti, or I will go to someone like vegan activists who are experts in that particular field.
True, true. That's a very, insightful response. And especially thank you for mentioning the orators who people can refer to. Probably we can all look up some videos by them after the session. So, one more question talks about the sustainability aspect of consuming plant-based foods. It says that the soil quality and crop yield has gone down significantly over past few decades. With all of this, are plant-based crops even reliable source of nutrition or livelihood? And I think there's one more question related to farmers committing suicide over the whole agriculture thing. So either one of you who would like to respond to this?
Pareen,
Sure.
if you want to go, I can go after you.
There is no doubt that the soil quality has declined. Uh, the reason for that is monoculture and industrialized agriculture. Okay. Uh, our ancestors, of course, they may not have had everything right, but they did have a few things right. There's no denying that. And the way agriculture was being practiced a few thousand years ago was you would plant crops in a cycle, right? So something in the winter, something in the spring. So what it really does is all of these different plants, they consume different nutrients in the soil, and at the same time they replenish the soil with different nutrients when they decompose, right? That unfortunately has been reduced to almost nil with modern industrialized agriculture and monocultures. That is the reason for the decline in soil quality, and why there is also a lot of theories coming up on how even an apple does not really contain uh, as many vitamins or minerals today as it did perhaps a few decades ago. There is no denying that. The only way to fix that is going to be to consider better ways of agriculture. Uh, the foremost place to start would be to cut off our dependence on monocultures. Majority of the monocultures are feeding animals in factory farming, in animal agriculture. Okay. What was the rest of the question?
It was talking about whether it is, reliable source of nutrition for vegans, because the soil is depleted. So basically, the plants may not be able to get the nutrition. So how can we rely on plant-based sources of nutrition?
Right. So the American Dietetics Association, as well as the British, have said that a well-planned whole food plant-based diet is suitable for all stages of life for all of us human beings. If you're able to get that for yourself, that's awesome. If you're still facing certain challenges with respect to your health, then it is best to get guidance from a professional who is, who's dedicated towards this. And if you are facing any specific deficiencies, then it's a great idea to just supplement. Uh, as per the direction from your healthcare provider.
Yeah, and this talking about soil quality and our crop yield and whatnot, as Pareen mentioned, most of our monoculture crops are going to feed non-human animals. So if we were to stop, using so much of the cropland and either rewild or repurpose them for either not monoculture but permaculture and different types of agricultures, which aren't going to be draining so much from the soil and nutrient, so much of nutrition from the soil, and actually gives back a lot more. That can be helpful. But I also tend to think that we need to reform our ways of agriculture. We need to get more efficient in the way we start. Efficiency has always been what we strive for everywhere. And if you look at veganic farming, it's doing great. There's a lot more produce. It's a lot more richer than compared to organic or compared to monoculture, etc. But I also think that's something that's going to be a huge plus, a huge revolution in the in the plant-based agriculture industry is vertical farming. Hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics. I think these are going to be great sources of plant-based agriculture, which basically I can grow what I think I forgot the amount, but in 1 square meter I can grow 10 times more. This is just a number I'm throwing out. I don't know the exact statistic, but you can grow 10 times the amount of crops in a 1 square feet. And so I have more control in vertical farming because I have more control over the temperature. I have more control over the whole humidity. I have more control over the quality of the plant. it is more what someone would call artificial. But even just because it's artificial or natural doesn't make it right or bad or good or wrong. I have more control over the equation here, and I can give it enough nutrition. And there are many studies on why vertical farming is equally nutritionally adequate. It is great. It's going to be a revolution in the upcoming decades or not whatnot. Because of climate change, we're going to have to shift to more locally sourced foods, where we don't want foods to travel from halfway across the planet for, let's say, potatoes or avocados and whatnot. But people are going to have to in their own house, they're going to have to vertically farm plants, so that it's going to be each one for their own. I think that's what our economy is moving towards, and that's what this is. It's a very futuristic take. It's a very I think some people might think of it as a dystopia altogether. But yes, vertical farming is definitely a positive that people should look into when talking about soil quality and crop yield, because that's going to revolutionize the industry. And also when it comes to about our plant-based sources, reliable sources of nutrition and livelihood, as Pareen mentioned, we have all nutrition. We have enough number of academics and nutrition of dietetics and associations which have mentioned that it is absolutely healthy. We can thrive on a plant-based diet without any issue.
Thank you so much again for sharing so many insightful details. And I think vertical farming, aquaponics, hydroponics are also, also hold the possibility to open up new career options and new
Sorry, I was
options
going
for
to get to that.
farmers as well.
Yes, exactly. I was going to get to that. I spoke to a farmer in Uttarakhand, and he dairy farmer, but he got so convinced of veganism, he turned vegan overnight, and he invited me to Uttarakhand. He said he wants to make his whole village a plant-based farming, a plant-based agricultural village. And I asked him, okay, so he asked him, how am I going to survive here? How am I going to make money out of this? Because we rely on so many things. I asked him, okay, so how often do you buy food for your cows and buffaloes? He's like, well, I feed at least 10 kgs of grain to my cows and buffaloes on a daily basis. I said, well, wouldn't that be more efficient if you just didn't do that? If you just use your money to grow plants only. But the issue that farmers are facing today is just that it's not about plants being cheaper to farm, but it's also about the subsidies, the tax they have to pay on plant-based farming, and also dairy farming is a source of daily income for them. Milk is a source of daily income for them, whereas plants is more of a seasonal thing, so they get money once every couple of weeks, once every couple of months. So to tackle that, I said, well, you have to go away from monoculture. If you grow one plant, it's going to give you one yield every couple of months. As Pareen mentioned, go away from monoculture. Grow multiple plants, so that some plant is giving you some source of some product almost every other day. And then I also introduced him to a friend's company who was into vertical farming, and he was blown away. He was like, can you please help me make this whole village into a vertical farming village? And I'm like, I can absolutely do that, but unfortunately I'm not in India anymore. But I've put them in touch. I put my friend's company, and I put the whole village in touch. The village was, they were not open to veganism. Obviously they were like, oh, we have been doing this for a long time, dairy farming is what we know and whatnot. But this person who went vegan, the dairy farmer, was very persistent. He was like, I will make sure that I will talk to the panchayat and whatnot, and I will tell them that this is the right way to do. It is cheaper, it is more money for vertical farming, because this person is going to help us through all of that. So I feel like for farmers who go through such a difficult lifestyle, for starters, we need to be grateful to them. They make food for us, which usually, if because of our busy schedules and busy lives, we can't do. Like I myself cannot grow plants and I cannot eat them, unfortunately. But we have to first thank them and help them shift to plant-based agriculture. It's about, yes, we can also antagonize them and say that, hey, you're causing harm, but also help to tell them, hey, these are the opportunities available for you to switch to from animal farming to a plant-based farming agriculture, or career options don't have to sway from animal farming to plant-based farming. You can sway to any other form of career path. For example, when Blockbuster, which is like a huge example always everyone takes, Netflix overtook Blockbuster. Blockbuster was this store where people would go and rent cassettes to watch movies and CDs to watch movies. But when the second internet streaming became a thing, Blockbuster just like completely died off. Or when industrialization came about, so many people lost their job because it was lesser manual labor required. But the point of fact is, when these things come about, there is new career options which are opening up for people. And we as vegans, I feel, not just as vegans, but as citizens of this country, citizens of this world, we need to help people transition from oppressive, oppressive industries to more, more open and non-oppressive industries. We should help them transition. And there are many companies which do that.
Very, very true. And I believe that if we do stand for justice, and if we are standing against the social injustice happening to animals, it only makes sense to be inclusive towards the farmers as well, because they are also victims of the industry. And
Yeah.
it would, of course, mean that if we are being inclusive towards them, we are also helping them out in this situation. So thank you for shedding light on that. One more question that we have is about people who transition to veganism and then they face some struggles, especially about nutrition. So the question says, a few people say, I went vegan, but I became anemic or had low BP, etc., etc. So many different challenges that they may be facing. So I went back to being non-vegan. So how do we answer this query? Pareen, would you like to go ahead first this time?
Sure. See, one thing that could have been an issue in the vegan diet that you probably would have been taking is that it was not really planned enough in order to meet your daily requirements of nutrition. Like I shared earlier, a vegan diet, a well planned, wholesome vegan diet, has been proven to be suitable for all stages of life. Plants do, in fact, contain all of the nutrients that we require, all of the amino acids, all of the fats, the carbohydrates, minerals, vitamins that we need. If we are still not able to get those from plants, then of course we need to reassess, right? Where are we going wrong? Because it shouldn't ideally be happening. But our bodies probably need a little bit of extra help in order to continue to be healthy. So, firstly, make sure that you are consuming all of the colorful vegetables, just eat the rainbow, as they say. It is really true. As cliche as it might sound, make sure that you are consuming, just eating the rainbow on a weekly basis. And if still your body is not able to cope, then definitely meet a healthcare provider who can help you out, who can help provide you uh, the plant-based support that you need, right? It is unfortunate that most medical doctors are not really receiving training in nutrition, and this, even still, most of the nutritional training that is being doled out is not particularly prominently plant based, right? A lot of research is coming up now. It has in the past few decades, but curriculum has still not caught up with the latest research. Okay, so try to find someone who can help you out, help you with plant based supplements if you require any, recommend plant based foods to you that are rich in the particular nutrient that your body may be lacking or your body may be needing support for. That's all I would like to say about that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Niyanth, something you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, when people say that they tried going vegan and then they had some sort of deficiency and stopped being vegan, there are multiple ways I can approach it. One way is obviously asking, hey, how did you do it? Like, maybe there were some issues that you kind of lacked in, which Pareen talked about, that you weren't necessarily, eating enough nutrients from eating the rainbow, as something that I always also talk about. Just eat all colors of the rainbow every week. Like, it's really great. I'm not sure how nutritionally sound the advice or how scientifically sound it is, but it just seems very intuitive to me to say that. But I also then asked them multiple things. I asked them, okay, so what have you been eating? And because a lot of people just think, okay, vegan, cut out meat and dairy, I'm going to eat potatoes the rest of my But actually, even if you just eat potatoes only, you can survive for 2 years or something like that. Literally, just potatoes only, because they have a lot of, it's very nutritionally adequate. But um, I would ask them how they've been eating, and then usually what we realize is that they've been eating quite unhealthy. They've been eating junk only. They don't know how to receive. They don't really know what to eat, where to eat, how to eat. It is surprising this happens in India because most of our Indian cuisines are plant-based by default. But usually, if they say they're anemic and whatnot, I say boiled spinach, boiled spinach, boiled spinach. And even if, let's say, let's say that even if you're at a point where you're still lacking nutrition, supplement, supplements have no issues at all. There's no demonstrated scientific peer-reviewed source that says that supplements are bad for you by any means. But I would also then extend one step further. I would ask, hey, let's say there was animal agriculture industry did not exist, and what exists was a human agriculture industry. And then, if let's say you were lacking nutrition, would you then make an excuse to go back to consuming humans, or would you find ways to say, I will never ever consume humans no matter what, I will find ways to supplement myself and be healthy? What would you do? Then they'll say mostly, yes, yeah, I will not consume humans. Okay, then you're being inconsistent right now, because we spoke about this earlier. You believe humans and animals are the same moral value. So you just need to understand that by your own moral value, you will not go back. You will find ways to stay healthy. And as Pareen spoke about, yes, always talk to a registered nutrition and not a doctor. Unfortunately, many of us cannot afford registered nutritionists and dietitians. That word has always been failing me in this whole meeting, dietitians. So I will always show them to, things like challenge22.com, where there are registered dietitians who help you for free, or veganuary.com, registered dietitians and nutritionists who help you for free, because what they care about is you going vegan, not about them making money out of it. So I always tell them, even if you can't afford it, these are some resources that you can access for absolutely free, that you can get some nutritional advice on.
Wonderful. That is very, very true. And there is a lot of guidance available as well on the subject. So thank you for sharing that. We'll take one last question because we've already overshot the time a little bit. So Jagriti has asked a very interesting question about medicine. What can be done in case of medicines? Some medicines are derived from animal products, and if not, most of them are at least tested on animals. So how do we deal with this?
Do you want to go first, Pareen, or do you want me to go first? Or you can go first. I'll go after you.
Well, all right, sure. In case of medicines, of course, see, something that needs to be always reinforced, what really veganism is. What is the definition of veganism? By definition, veganism is not consuming any animal products as far as possible and practical. Okay. Now, in majority of cases, it is possible and practical to get medicines that are plant-based. A lot, there are a lot of strides that are being made within the pharma and cosmetics industries in order to test medicines and cosmetics and other products, not on animals, but testing in vitro. A lot of research is being done in that specific area. So vegan, cruelty-free medicines are on way to becoming more accessible. That being said, if there is no medicine, no plant-based medicine or vegan medicine that is available, and if your health is at risk, please put yourself first. Veganism, by definition, is insofar as possible and practical. Okay? Please don't put your health on the line. So if you have to get admitted to hospital, or you have to get certain medicine, that you are in a dire situation, please put yourself first. If you are not able to take care of yourself, how will you be the voice of animals? Right? That being said, definitely do your research to find, do your research, try to find the right guidance. Like Niyanth pointed out, that Challenge 22 and Veganuary have registered dietitians on board who are providing help at no cost. Try to reach out for the right resources, for the right guidance and help, to be able to find, you know, medical help and support that is vegan. If you're still not able to do that, please don't beat yourself up. Take care of yourself. Okay.
Thank you, Pareen, for sharing. Niyanth, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's am I audible?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
sorry, yeah.
You're audible.
Okay, so yeah, I would definitely talk about how, yes, animal testing is almost redundant today, because the closest animal that we test on, that is the mice, in terms of in terms of gene quality, is the mice. And once a certain animal testing passes mice trials and reaches human trials, it fails almost 92% of the time. As in, it passes only 8% of the time, which means it's a very inefficient process. And as Pareen mentioned, there's a lot of research going into in silico, in vitro methods, and there are so many other methods that are going about that are trying to eliminate animal testing. But if you cannot avoid animal testing, animal tested medicines, then there's no other go but to use it. We unfortunately live in a non-vegan world, and there are many aspects of our lifestyle that are like still harboring animal cruelty, still practicing animal cruelty. If there's no way to go about it, there's unfortunately no way to go about it. But what I normally do is, when medicines are prescribed, I Google, hey, are there non-capsule or like vegan alternatives for this medicine? Non-tested, because usually when why something is tested, for example, talk about heme iron. Heme iron does not exist in plant-based foods. Heme iron is more of an animal-based thing. So when Impossible Foods started off, they wanted to be nutritionally equivalent to meat, and hence they said, I'm going to supplement heme iron into this, and they were going to make it lab grown heme iron, and there was no test, or there was no study before that showed that heme iron made from lab is not going to harm your health and whatnot. So they had to test on animals. Unfortunately, they killed 181 mice, the Impossible Foods. So yeah, so there are many reasons as to why people test. So some medicines, basically what they do is, let's say company A has already tested on animals, so company B will not test because they're using the same medicines. So you can probably go for those. You can go for those alternatives. You can go for the alternatives which don't contain capsules, which don't contain any gelatin in them. Look for it. If there are no options available, then yes, unfortunately, you'll have to go with the one which has animal cruelty in it.
Those are very helpful as well as useful pointers that both of you shared. Thank you so much. And I believe that for somebody who wants to, at least start walking in the direction of going vegan, they can also start by switching from animal tested products that we use on a daily basis, like maybe shampoos, toothpaste, everything. Give up clothes which use fabrics that come from animals like wool, leather, silk, probably. Stop going to zoos, circuses. These are very small changes in life that everybody can start making, at least on their journey to become vegan. And I would also like to share one more thing for people who are interested in going vegan. We at FIAPO also have something called the 21 days plant-based challenge, where what we share is for 21 days, we send free recipes, nutritional guidance, and, we send like emails having all these details for 21 days. And of course, it's completely free of cost. I can just paste the link in the chat box for anyone who would like to sign up. So this is a completely free of cost challenge that you can take up for 21 days, and you can try how the diet works. And like the two of you shared pointers, it involves a lot of making a lot of things at home from very locally sourced ingredients, because we don't want veganism to be portrayed as an elite thing or an expensive thing. So this is a very simple way in which people can also choose to have a plant-based diet for 21 days and see how it works for them. So again, going vegan, despite all of the arguments which are there, it's of course the more ethical choice to make. And I thank both of you for coming here,
Um,
sparing time, and sharing so
Stuti,
many
I
things.
just want to. I think there's a question that is just asked. Just quickly, just touch upon it. It's just a very small
Sure,
answer.
sure,
How
sure.
do I work out on it? I think this is an important question. That's why I want to pick it up. It's just about, there are so many aspects to veganism, and how do I motivate myself? There's so many aspects. How do I keep doing it? One thing that I always tell people is, if your why is strong, your how is very easy. Your why to be vegan should be strong. I mean, I'm not saying it is not strong, it is already strong, but strengthen it further. do some research, watch documentaries. The more emotionally and more logically and philosophically you feel connected to veganism, the more motivated you are to not, harbor to animal cruelty. That's one thing that I would always say. If you think that you're lacking motivation to like figure out how to be vegan, then always strengthen your why. Like watch documentaries, talk to more vegans. Um, just being in a vegan circle is so motivating because you're just around that energy all the time, and they help you out. Okay, so usually when you're starting out on your own, you just don't know how to go. Okay, I'm like, where do I start with? But find vegans, they'll help you through all of it because they've done all that before. Why do you want to start from scratch when they just help you from where they already are at? So just find vegans, interact with a lot more vegans, and they will definitely help you. I hope that answer helps you, Karan.
So very true. So very true. Thank you so much, Niyanth, for answering that as well. Again, I thank both of you for coming here, sparing time, and sharing so many insightful details. I also personally got a lot to learn, and I hope our audience also got to learn a lot from this. I thank everybody who came here today, attended the webinar, interacted with us with so many interesting questions. And we hope that even in the future, we're able to bring such questions, such details, such information to each one of you. Thank you, Pareen. Thank you, Niyanth.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
much for the
Thank you
opportunity.
so much. Thank you, Stuti, Niyanth, Sarita, Jagriti, the entire FIAPO team, and thanks to everyone who's been with us for the entire hour. I really appreciate all of you, and all the best to all of you.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you so much for the opportunity. It always feels really great to fight for the animals. So thank you so much for the opportunity to
It's a
FIAPO,
pleasure to
Stuti,
have
and
you.
Pareen. Thank you for being here as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.